with demand expected to come back, the question remains, does this mean the economy is back on track?
Companies now, after experimenting with offshore in places like India, Philippines, and Poland, want to bring those jobs back.
We invest in the U.S. We're the biggest exporter in the country. In the cycle we're in right now, we're creating jobs.
From Radio America, it's Neil Asbury's Made in America, the show that explores American industry, large and small, and promotes American-made products everywhere. Put Neil Asbury's Made in America to work for you.
A very big welcome to you today. I'm Neil Asbury, together with co-host Dr. Rich Rothman. Say, Rich, this week, it's an amazing thing, right? I mean, President Trump announces $200 billion more in tariffs, $200 billion with a B. I mean, that's a lot of products. And it's starting out at 10%. And if the Chinese don't cooperate, and January 1st, it goes up to 25%. And yet the stock market, it just isn't phased at all. I mean, it just continues to hit new highs. So, it's an amazing thing to see, this sort of, economic disruption with the supply chains of all these businesses, and yet the stock market continuing to just chug along. It just doesn't kind of make sense to me. What about you?
Well, that's the really crazy, unusual thing about everything right now. And we've been watching this going on now for months. Tariffs back and forth, the threat of trade wars, even though we know China started a trade war 40 years ago. And yet, the market at this point, even Jamie Dimon this week said, well, they're not really trade wars. It's more like trade skirmishes. And it's sort of like everyone's positioning, Neil, where they want to be as it relates to, trade deficits and things like that. But I don't know if it's a bad thing, because we're getting a deal with Mexico, which we're going to talk about. We're going to get a deal with Canada. We're getting a deal with the EU. So maybe there is rhyme to the reason and reason to the rhyme.
Yeah, we're definitely going to be following this and talking about it more even today. I mean, this is an unfolding situation, but it's not only our manufacturers, that are getting hurt by this. I mean, supply chains. 50% of what we import from China are components and materials that are used in our own manufacturing goods. But it's also the agricultural market. America, is the breadbasket of the world. I mean, we provide the world with so much food. I mean, it's incredible what our agricultural community and industry has been able to do. Absolutely phenomenal. And, so how is this impacting them? We've heard about, President Trump, Iowa is very important. The Midwest is very important. The really big, the big industrial type farms, farming, really isn't this small little mom and pop farmers that it was like when I was growing up in southern Ohio. And my grandfather was a farmer, and all these small farms. But, they've been bought up by these corporate farms. But that's not true everywhere. And in South Florida, a very interesting place in southwest Dade County, the Redlands, and beautiful, beautiful agricultural estates. But many of them are just these small entrepreneurial farms, and they produce all kinds of things, exotic fruits. I mean, I love it, during lychee season or mango season, avocados, star fruit, just all kinds of incredible things that they produce there. And it's just like anything in the world, it seems, that grows in the Redlands. And, there's a lot of farmers there. So how are these tariffs particularly impacting the small farmer? And I think the Redlands represents a great cross-section of the American farmer. It's not only the exotics, but they grow all kinds of fruits and vegetables and all kinds of things that our country benefits from, and especially the Southeast and in Florida. We're very pleased to have on the show Michael Hutter, who is with A Taste of Redland. The Redlands, meaning that area in Southwest Dade that's got all these great farmers, these great agricultural estates. And he's going to talk to us about how does this trade war impact the family farm, the small farmer. Michael, welcome to Made in America.
Hi, how are you?
So I love the Redlands. I've been there. It's a great place. I love the markets on the side of the street and all of that. I lived in Southeast Asia for a good part of my life, and all the stuff that grows in Southeast Asia grows in the Redlands, and all of that stuff that you can't get anywhere, but you can get it in the Redlands. So tell us, what's happening with your constituents as far as these tariffs? I mean, are they good? Are they bad? Does it make a difference? And what's the future bring for that very exciting part of the very exciting agricultural community that's so important, especially to Florida?
A lot of what you mentioned is exciting down here. A lot of it's grown in Southeast Asia grows here. Lychee, avocado, star fruit, dragon fruit, all these exotic, exciting things. But then we have strawberries, peppers, tomatoes, and all sorts of other things that we grow here as well. So, NAFTA is a funny thing, when you look at it in the farming community, because what the big problem in the farming community related to NAFTA is kind of the way we look at it in general. When we talk about soybean and we talk about corn and we talk about a lot of those areas, those are large areas. But when you break it down to, what are the smaller farms, the family farms, like what you spoke about, and a lot of what is down here in South Florida, it's a different sector of the farming community that's been affected greatly by NAFTA and the way the program works in terms of import and export.
So how does this change now?
Well, I mean, unfortunately, I don't think we're moving into a status quo period right now. I think that we're actually, since NAFTA's inception, 300,000 small farms have disappeared, and a little bit of what you mentioned in the consolidation, to larger farms. So, what you have in your refrigerator at home every day, you don't find in your refrigerator corn and soybean for the most part. What you find are the fruits and vegetables. So what's really at risk here right now is what we grow here in the U.S. in terms of fruits and vegetables. If we continue to go in the direction we are, which are depleting those farms into small farms and relying on the imports that come from elsewhere, we're basically risking our food security and everything else in that kind of position. Because as those farms disappear, it's not something that can so easily be replaced. Those farms are being replaced with red roofs and development and everything else, and it's not as if we could just go out and get farmland again and start it up. The costs, would be prohibitive to do so. So it's more important than ever that we start paying attention to what's happening on the local level at our farms, or pretty soon we're going to be completely dependent here in the U.S. It's already 50% now on what is imported in terms of fruits and vegetables, and that number will increase even further. Mexico just talked about putting a plan in place of subsidizing 2.5 million acres of farmland under the new administration, and it would be subsidized. So it's going to be even more difficult than ever. So it's really not status quo, and a lot of that is really earmarked to come to the U.S. and decimate crops that are in Florida, like tomato, avocado, and so many of the other things, blueberries, et cetera, et cetera.
So, this is Rich. Good to have you on the show, Mike. So let me ask you a question. It seems like when we're talking about NAFTA and changing NAFTA and coming up with new rules and regs for a new NAFTA, 21st century NAFTA, it appears, from my point of view, just listening to you, that perhaps the small guy, the family farm, the 100, 200, 350, 800-acre farm, whatever it's going to be, are those guys aren't being represented, or are they being represented? It sounds like there's a whole different psychology that's out there that we never hear about.
Rich, they're not at all being represented. Now, in some cases, they're winners and losers like everything. And certainly NAFTA has been able to bill itself as, there are winners and losers on all sides, and it's supposed to balance things out. But we have to be careful at what we look at in the details of something like this, because really in the details, that's where the problems exist. And it's, again, what you spoke about, the family farms, the small farms, what's in our refrigerators, okay? So what we have to be careful in what we're doing is we're replacing, when we look at the numbers overall, again, that's the tendency of what we do is looking at the numbers overall, and we say, farming is increasing, and that's corn and soybean and things like that in the export side. But what we've replaced it with in the dollars is importing what we actually eat, what's in your refrigerator, what's on your table at home tonight. And so that's the problem. So when you look at the numbers overall, it might mean one thing, but when you break it down to the details and what you just said, the representation of the small farm, what are we doing here? Are we replacing what we eat for what we export? And again, that export's volatile. Mexico just pointed out recently in other places, they said that in a minute they could just replace that with with corn and soybean from Brazil and Argentina and other places. It's something that they've threatened. So think about the balance of that, and that if they decided to just do that, and then they decided not to export fruits and vegetables to the U.S. anymore, where would we get them? We don't grow them anymore.
Mike, I mean, very good, very, very good points. There's a lot that goes into this, and it's so important that we protect our small farms, our entrepreneurial community within the agricultural place of our market. As you say, very important, the food we eat. We cannot disrupt the products that we need from the agricultural community. Otherwise, it could be devastating. Mike, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Remember, this is happening right now. It's not something that's going to take time to take place. It's something that's affecting us as we speak.
It's here and now.
And, I appreciate
good point.
Both of you putting a focus on it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Coming up, Dr. Ruffman and I are going to have some thoughts for the day here. That's all these headlines, a lot of stuff to talk about. You don't want to miss this.
Made in America.
Welcome to Made in America. I'm your host, Neal Asbury, together with co-host Dr. Rich Ruffman. So, Rich, we talked a lot about tariffs and about NAFTA and about trade agreements, but we haven't spoken a lot about the plight of the family farmer, and it's really been going on for a long time. And if you say that, China, it's taken 40 years for this trade war, to come to where it is today, and no one's ever done anything about it. It's just been kind of gradually growing and growing. But the plight of the family farmer, has been going on even longer than that. The roll up of the corporate farms, all of these subsidies have been targeted and have been given to these millionaire farmers or these very large corporate farms. I mean, you have money coming in from Saudi Arabia and all over the world, buying up our farms and rolling them up into these corporate farms. Our smaller farmers cannot compete. It's kind of like there's some similarity here to the Dodd-Frank, right? I mean, with the community bankers. Congress made it so complicated for our small family or our Main Street type of bankers, the bankers who have been there in these communities, in these rural communities forever. They know their local community. They know their local small businesses. But they can't compete because of the cost of regulation, and they either have to get out of business or merge with a larger bank. So what's happened to our family farmers is a lot the same. You got, all of this regulation, you got all of these subsidies, and if you're not well prepared, you don't have armies of lawyers and accountants, you can't get the subsidies. These subsidies are making it unfair for the smaller farmers to compete. It's a real mess. I mean, it's a real mess. Rich, and I think Mike Hutter from Taste of Redland has really given us a lot of light here on what is being faced by this very important part of our market. America is not the breadbasket of the world anymore. I made a mistake when I introduced Mike. I mean, we're getting more and more of our food from overseas, and as he said, this is a national security risk.
I think it is, and I'm very, very sensitive, as I'm sure you are, to the plight of the small farmer. I mean, I told you, when I went to school after my freshman year, I lived out in the countryside outside of Syracuse. And they're all farmers. Everyone there is a farmer. It's a farming community. And they're very hardworking. They're great Americans. They have the Puritan work ethic. And they work from early in the morning before the sun is up. The kids go to school. They come back. They do their chores. They clean up. They do their dinner, and they do their homework, and they go to bed, and they get up at 4:30 in the morning. They start it all over again. But the problem is, it's a 7-day week, 365-day a year job, because the farm doesn't go away. You got to deal with it. And I thought this is a very, very good perspective, because we don't, when we listen to the talking heads on the different news channels, news shows, they don't really talk about the plight of the individual family farmer, which has been under attack for so long, particularly under the Obama administration, through the EPA, through over-regulatory powers, through, a federal government, taking more and more charge of what you can and cannot do. And ultimately, even with the death tax, People die and they can't leave the farm to their family because they can't afford the taxes to get the farm from the deceased mother or father or uncle or aunt or something like that. So this is a very important perspective to have, that these are the people out there who are just like you and me, working hard, trying to make a living. They're not necessarily wealthy people. They're working hard for a good life, for their family and their future family. And I think it's very
providing an incredibly important function to society. I mean, and feeding us.
Well, yes, and they're very passionate about that, Neal.
It's
tough
work.
They're super passionate about it.
It's very, very tough work. I mean, it's like you're up very, very early. You're working. It's manual work. It's hard work, and we gotta appreciate these people, and they are the unsung heroes of our economy.
I totally agree with that.
Spend enough time, looking out for them, just like we haven't spent enough time looking out for our community bankers, who are there in the front line of our entrepreneur community and providing our family farms, as well as our small businesses, our risk takers, our entrepreneurs, and providing them the funding that they need.
Neal, that's a great point. That's a terrific point. Who do you think is going to work with a family farm? Bank of America or some really too big to fail bank, or the bank that's down the block, a couple of 3 miles away? And I saw this a lot of the years I was up there. You could have a great summer, have a great crop. The corn's doing great, cow corn as well as human consumptive corn. And then you have another summer that is totally garbage. There's no rain. It dries up. They lose their crop. Well, what do you think these family people do? They need loans. They need insurance. They have different needs and necessities than somebody who is on a 5,000-acre farm run by ADM or something like that. And I'm not against the ADMs of the world. I think it's very important to have that. But at the same time, we can't turn our back on what made America great.
And what I did not hear from Mike from Taste of Redland was so now that NAFTA has created this problem from the past, has it been fixed in this latest rendition? And Mike didn't seem to think that the new version of NAFTA was going to be any better than the old version of NAFTA
and the
for the small family farmers.
Neal, that's a really good point. No, what he told me when we had this conversation is that there is a problem with the new deal. And once again, these guys are on the periphery of the deal. The meat of the deal is really with the large groups.
Interesting. Hey, Rich, we got to move on here. A very, very important topic, a very passionate topic. But we got another great guest, and we're going to kind of change gears here. We're going to talk about the job creation that is done in our entertainment industry, and it's huge. I mean, it is very big. I mean, the entrepreneurial community within entertainment provides a great thing for our country. Not only great entertainment, but creating jobs and opportunity. We're going to talk to Richard Kaken, who's the producer of Havana Music Hall, starting out in Coral Gables and going up to Broadway. I definitely want to see this. It's going to be a great show. We're going to talk to Richard and about the jobs that he's creating. You don't want to miss this.
Made in America.
Sharply higher at the open, stocks continued to perform well over the course of the day Tuesday.
And I think that bodes well here over the next couple of years for having bigger demands coming to this country.
Now, more of Neal Asbury's Made in America.
Welcome to Made in America. I'm your host, Neal Asbury, together with co-host Dr. Rich Ruffin. So, Rich, one of my most favorite things, and I get to go to New York a lot, and I love New York. You grew up there. I grew up across the river in New Jersey. But is Broadway, and specifically the Broadway musical. I mean, aren't they the most incredible thing? You can go there, you can just kind of lose yourself. You just are totally overwhelmed with the beauty, the costumes, the dancing, the music. The only thing I don't like is when they get political. Why do they have to get political and destroy the whole thing? I would love to go see Hamilton, but I won't see Hamilton because, they're just political hacks. Why disrespect half your audience and let's everybody forget that for a while. Isn't that why we go to Broadway, is to see a beautiful musical and forget about life and just to be overwhelmed of the beauty and the art of the musical?
It's sort of like escapist fiction. I mean, it takes you someplace else. It tells you a story. It kind of summarizes things that may be happening in your life. But for a while, you kind of transcend, and you forget about your day-to-day, and you get involved in the show, and it actually makes you feel better. You know, there are shows that you sit there, and everyone's singing at the end of the show like an Oliver. You know, consider yourself at home, and the place won't leave. You know, West Side Story, people were singing the songs, going out and dancing. Richard Kagan's going to do the same thing with this wonderful show, Havana Music Hall.
And talking about Richard, he's on with us right now. Richard, welcome to Made in America.
Thank you so much. I'm a big fan of your show.
Oh, I thank you. Oh, that's so kind. And I'm a big fan of yours and all the incredible work you've done over the years on Broadway and the shows that you brought us. And now Havana Music Hall. I got to tell you, just the whole concept of Cuban music on Broadway and the fun and the dancing and, you know, all the beautiful costumes. I mean, this has got to be a hit. So, Richard, tell us a little bit about Havana Music Hall and all the work you're doing, the jobs you're creating, the excitement that you have going on with this.
Yeah, I'm really interested to talk about the job creation, but this started about 20 years ago when I saw Buena Vista Social Club, that great documentary, and I saw those great Cuban musicians. I've always loved Cuban music. And so what happened is I started thinking about getting the rights, but the music and the story were public domain. And I had this idea of going after the Cuban musicians, and luckily I saw a movie called Chef, and I saw Jose Perico Hernandez, who played the father to Sofia Vergara. I said, I got to talk to him. And he told me his story. In 1958, he was a Cuban musician at 23, he was doing great. And then all of a sudden the regime came in and they said, do you have any questions? He raised his hand. He said, my child was born with forceps. So they said, come to the ministry. They put him in hard labor for 3 years. He could no longer be a musician, couldn't talk to his family. And he told me his story. And he said, if you can listen to me, I would like to help you. And he was crying. So he said, send me some music, because I don't look like a Cuban musician. I'm now a 72-year-old white Jewish guy. So I sent him the stuff. And the next thing I know, he shows up with like 12 Cuban musicians. And for the past 4 years, we have worked on Havana Music Hall. So what it is, my idea is that it's an after-hours club. I didn't even know if they had them, but they did. And it's a wonderful club. And people, after they get done working at the Tropicana and all of the kinds of places, they come in, late at night, 2, 3 in the morning, and they all sing and they dance, and everything is wonderful. And there's 2 young stars, a young Ramona and a young Rolanda, who run it. And they are fabulous, and they get their big break to be at the Tropicana opening night, to opening on December 31st, 1958. They are ecstatic. This is the dream. So they go on stage, they do a great job, and boom, you hear an airplane and Batista leaves. And from that moment on in the show, you see what happens to these people over a 40, 50-year period of time. So at the end of it, you say, it's not political, it's historical. But we have 22 songs. We have the greatest choreographer. She did On Your Feet. We've got the greatest Cuban musicians. You're going to walk out singing, we think, humming the music, dancing, feeling great. But you're going to walk out and say, you know what? There's something about the power of survival, the power of family, the power of love, the joy of music. And hopefully the audience will relate to that and say, you know, there's something wonderful about how I relate to this. That's really important. If you see the show come from away on Broadway, you walk out saying, wow, what a great thing about humanity. Now, I don't think the music's that great, but you walk out feeling connected to that show. And that's what we have to do here. So,
well, I think this is terrific. And the people that you're working with, aside from Perico Hernandez, which is global, everyone knows. You have Oscar Hernandez is part of this. You have Larry Blank is involved in this. I mean, you have people who have won, 3 Grammys, 3 Tonys, have done major shows like Chicago. You have people who've done On Your Feet. You have great writers, and you're employing.
On Your Feet was incredible, Rich. On Your Feet, I saw that.
God,
that was incredible.
Well, he's got the same person who's done that. He's working with him right here in Miami.
And we have 2 of the stars who are on it. But I want to just
you got about a minute, Rich.
I want to tell you about the creation. So what happens is, I had an idea. I wrote a song, so it's just me. Then I sent it to my music copyist. That's another person. Once he gets it back, I send it to my lawyer to copyright. That's 3. And then I want to have a demo. So I have to hire a recording engineer in a studio and musicians and singers, and they all have lawyers and contracts. And so all of a sudden you have a whole bunch of people. Well, to do this show, I wrote 30 songs. So I had to do that 30 times. And then you say, hey, I have a good idea, so let's do some workshops. Workshops mean you have to hire space, you have to hire people, you have to start putting this whole thing together.
You gotta feed them.
Before you know it, as we are now, we're up to 100 people working on the show. If the show is as successful as we believe it will be, and we go to Broadway, the $2 million that we've put up so far becomes another 10. And most of that, other than the sets, is labor.
Hey, Richard, thank for that. Here at Made in America, we're all about creating jobs and promoting entrepreneurialism, and our entertainment community is absolutely fabulous. And the way that you just described it, amazing. And not only can you go to Havana Music Hall and see an incredible show, beautiful show, all the dancing and the music, the beautiful music that you've written, but you can also learn a little bit about history, and I love it. So you got to get out there and be inspired on all these different levels, and such an important part of the history of our country, especially in our region, that you're going to be telling us at the same time with this beautiful art that came out of that. Absolutely phenomenal. Richard Kaken, who's the producer of Havana Music Hall, opening up in Coral Gables and then on its way to Broadway, creating all kinds of jobs and enthusiasm, as well as it moves to New York. Richard, thanks for coming on the show.
It was an honor. Thank you so much for having me.
Coming up, we have Justin Dent, who's the co-founder and executive director of GenFKD, and he says that colleges should teach more entrepreneurialism. Rich and I agree. You don't want to miss this.
Made in America.
Welcome to Made in America. I'm your host, Neal Asbury, together with co-host Dr. Rich Ruffin. Hey, Rich, I remember that interview that we did with Charlie Daniels, the legendary songwriter.
Oh, yeah. No, I was
and musician.
jazzed about that. I used that word
was really
on purpose,
cool.
I guess.
And it was so phenomenal because, I've admired Charlie and his music and working with Bob Dylan and, being a studio musician. And, he's been on so much stuff, and you've heard him so many times before he even became a musician in his own right, as a headliner in his old right. But you know what Charlie told us? He says that the greatest thing in life that he did was not about the music, just for the music, but all the jobs that he created. All the jobs that he created as a musician in Charlie Daniels Band and touring and, the studio and all of that kind of stuff. It was great to hear Richard Kaken, who's now a very successful producer of Broadway shows and musicals, and his new show, Havana Music Hall. And the thing that he was so jazzed up about was about all the jobs he's creating. Isn't that phenomenal?
I think it's terrific. I just think that what people don't understand is that when you're in the entertainment business, it's not just what you see. It's a whole team, a whole culture of people behind the people who are performing. And it's a very, very big business. It's very expensive. And at the level of Charlie Daniels, we're talking, again, like Richard Kaken just pointed out for his Broadway show, hundreds of people are behind it to make it happen.
So there's all kinds of entrepreneurs. There's entertainment entrepreneurs. We don't necessarily say that, but yes, they are. They're entrepreneurs, and they're doing this. They're taking a lot of, what do you say, $2 million he spent on Havana Music Hall already, and they're still just getting it together. Entrepreneurialism, what a wonderful thing. And it doesn't stop there. In our educational system, what are we going to do to teach entrepreneurialism? And how early of an age should we teach entrepreneurialism? And it's really just something that people have to learn. They just kind of stumble into it like me and like Rich. But yet, it shouldn't be that way. We should be very proactive with our students, with our young people in teaching entrepreneurialism. We're very pleased to have on with us right now Justin Dent, who is the co-founder and executive director at GenFKD. He's got a piece in Real Clear Politics, very good piece. He says, time to add entrepreneurship to the college curriculum. Rich and I could not agree more. Justin, welcome to Made in America.
Oh, gentlemen, thanks for having me on so much.
So we love it, and so much. Right now, I just got actually an honorary doctor degree, entrepreneurship at Nova University, and I know that a lot of universities now are talking about entrepreneurship and saying that this is very important. And now they're having curriculum and they're actually having degrees in entrepreneurship. Mm-hmm. So tell us, what is the status of entrepreneurship at our colleges and, for that matter, at our high schools? I don't think we can start early enough here.
Absolutely, and congratulations on the doctorate. That's a wonderful accomplishment. And I think you're absolutely right. And in terms of asking when to start adding it into the education system, I don't think that there is such a thing as too early. I think our K through 12 entire system, people are so creative when they come into school, and we should really capture that. And entrepreneurship is a wonderful way to allow students to use their creative juices before we beat it out of them in the rest of testing and all of other formal education. For colleges specifically, you're right. We've seen this great evolution of entrepreneurship, and I think people are now starting to really think about how can we support students in their entrepreneurship ventures. I'm coming now from a great meeting with Georgia Tech, which has this wonderful ambition to have 300 startups come out of their school every year. And what an ambition that is, particularly for colleges which have traditionally just said, we're just going to teach you how to do something in theory, but not in practice. And I think that there's finally this movement to start bridging that gap and really supporting students and giving them the resources to start a business and to create those jobs that you were talking about, because I don't think that there's any student who wouldn't find that as an important way to give back to their community.
Well, I think it's a very, very rare person who has that DNA that they want to get out and create something on their own. I mean, sometimes in life they wind up doing it because mother is the necessity is a mother of invention, and they have to do that, like my son in Chicago. Graduated with a master's in a great school, and he couldn't get the job he wanted, so we went out and started a company, and 12 years later, they're very successful. My younger son's done the same thing to a degree. Neal is a self-made individual, and one of the things I love about Neal Asbury, to be perfectly honest for everybody, is that he did this all on his own. And he's created a tremendous company. And I wound up from teaching college to being in the business world. It's a unique ability, and it's really time for the colleges to reflect that at the right level with the right people.
Absolutely. Colleges do a lot to support those who come in with a special disposition to math or physics or really any hard discipline. And I think it's interesting that we haven't really looked at what that entrepreneurial gene is and how to cultivate and support that. And so I think that there's a lot more work that has to be done on looking at how do we find the Neals, how do we find those who have that spark, and how can we really help them to grow it? Because it's like any muscle. The more that we work it, the more that we exercise it, the stronger it becomes.
Hey, Justin, unfortunately, we're out of time. I mean, fascinating. I think what we need to do at our colleges is get entrepreneurs to teach entrepreneurship. I mean, this is not a textbook.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
This is not a textbook topic. It's got to be from the heart. It's got to be passion, and you've had to been there. You've had to make payroll. You've had to pay for health care. You've had to, go beg, borrow, and steal from everybody
you
you know.
Had to suffer along the way and understand risk versus reward. That's what it comes to.
Yeah, you're going to have to feel the blues if you're going to sing the blues, right? You're going to have to experience entrepreneurship if you're going to teach it. Hey, but we got to go. I mean, Phil's telling us there in Washington, we got to go. And Justin, wonderful guest, wonderful work.
All right.
And we're going to get you back real soon. Coming up, Dr. Ruffman and I are going to have some final thoughts for the day.
Made in America.
Welcome to Made in America. I'm your host, Neal Asbury, together with co-host Dr. Rich Ruffman. Hey, Rich, let's continue with that a little bit. I mean, Justin Dent, our great guest, co-founder, executive director of GenFKD, does a lot of work in providing actually curriculum for colleges to teach entrepreneurship. My daughter's doing an MBA right now at Nova University in South Florida, and she came back the other day and said, Dad, I'm in marketing right now, but I think I'm going to change to entrepreneurship. They actually have a now course that you can get a master's in entrepreneurship. So I think we're making a lot of progress. But I think we still got a long way to go. And I think that there's still a hesitance at the universities because, the professors, it's kind of like they got their culture and their thing and their clique, that, they should really reach out to the community, bring in great entrepreneurs to teach entrepreneurship. I just don't think you can get away from it. It's not a textbook subject.
And I'll tell you, it's interesting that you said that because when I took Michael up to Chicago, when I settled him into his new apartment and he registered for his classes, and I kind of hung out up there for a while, and I met the dean of the English department up in Chicago, and and they were talking about magazines and, things that I've done over the years because I've been in media for so many decades. And they said, well, we have a guy teaching, magazines, the business of magazines and publishing. And I said, oh, my God, that's terrific. Who is it? And they told me the guy's name, Doctor whatever. And I said, and what magazines has he published? And the answer was none. And I said, wow. Having done, at least at that point in my life, 9 magazines, all successful, it's like, well how do you do that? Just like we said on air. Unless you've done it, unless you understand, all the pitfalls, all the challenges, and you live through the fact that, you've got $22,000 in the bank and you've got, $47,000 worth of bills you have to pay in 48 hours, and you don't know how it's going to happen, and that's including the IRS and the payroll, then, you really don't understand, the import of what it is to be an entrepreneur. So I think if Justin's saying we've got to get it into the colleges, and if you do it with the right people, I mean, that's what America's all about, Neal.
Well, you got to do it with the right people, and that's just it. And I just think that in some educational institutions, there's sort of like this wall about, okay, we're the professors, and, we're the ones and the only ones who can teach and who can have time with our students and who can be around the students, and they prevent some really great talent that would like to come in and help. Hey, look, we don't want to take over their jobs. We're too busy for that.
Exactly. No, I want to do that. I did
take over their jobs. But we do want to help our entrepreneurial community and follow up with those entrepreneurs who are going to take over from us and share from our experience. And there's just not a lot of ways for that to happen. But I do want to mention that Nova Southeast University in South Florida has been really great at engaging the entrepreneurial community in and around the Fort Lauderdale area. And it's wonderful. I just would like to see more and more of that happen. And I've seen other universities that's really put up a wall. Oh, no, you can't. Yeah, we'll let you talk to the professors, and, they kind of reach out to you. But no, we don't want you to be around the students. You're not qualified to be like that. You cannot qualified to be there. Hey, Rich, changing gears here for a second, but a headline this week: Amazon will consider 3,000 cashless or cashier-less, so no cashiers. That's right. What I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Cashier-less.
That's right.
Stores by 2021. Yeah, I was just thinking about that. I mean, what happens? Like you just put a bunch of stuff in a bag and you just walk out, and all of a sudden it just charges your card? I mean, how does that happen?
No. It's pretty sophisticated. You walk around the aisles, and as you take something off the shelf and put it into your cart, it's scanned and read, and it hits your cart to get out. And as you go out, you're already pre-registered with your debit or credit card, and it hits the card and you leave. You just walk out. It's a pretty sophisticated system. I'm sure nothing will go wrong with that, don't you think?
Well, interesting. Here's another one, Rich. Alibaba's Jack Ma, very famous guy. I mean, an incredible guy. I mean, the entrepreneur who created Alibaba, an incredible internet company. He promised President Trump that he was going to bring 1 million jobs less, and now he's kind of backing down from that. You think he's getting any political influence there? Real quick.
Well, you know what? Maybe that's just leverage for the deals that are going on or not going on with China right now. I would say sit back and wait to see what happens.
Take a deep breath. Hey, Rich, we're out of time.
I can't believe
Isn't that sad? I mean, this has been such a fast show, a great show, a lot of passion here today. But we're going to be back again next week, Rich, with another adventure of Made in America, where we never stop fighting for your jobs.